Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. After listening to the contributions from the honourable members of the opposition, it became blatantly obvious that they were completely oblivious of the rationale and the need of such a 2021-2022 budget. The lack of imagination to respond to, or the humility to agree with the merits of the budget, led to a desperate and fruitless path of politicization, creating fear over a basic administrative matter, and in the process have demeaned and disrespected the intellect of the landowners and the general population at large, and basically a wholesale digression of discussing anything but the budget. In simple terms, Mr. Speaker, sir, or they may understand in TikTok terms, they lost the plot. In fact, they were completely caught off guard with the budget, Mr. Speaker, sir, because they only had doom and gloom in their mind and were therefore not expecting the bold and extraordinary measures that were announced. They were hoping that we will fail in this budget, that we will announce major cuts to civil service salaries, pull back on social welfare and income support for the unemployed, increase taxes perhaps, and leave our businesses and our MSMEs behind. They were definitely not prepared for a people's budget designed to put people first, designed, in fact, to put Fiji first. Mr. Speaker, sir, the opposition also could not accept the fact that we are far ahead in the game to achieve herd immunity. It is just a matter of months and we will be there soon, God willing, Mr. Speaker, sir. That is what is hurting them, as they cannot see this crisis coming to an end, because they have realized that despite their cunning attempts to take political advantage from this pandemic, they have failed, Mr. Speaker, sir. And with the crisis ending, they don't have much time left on their hand. We have taken vaccination very seriously, Mr. Speaker, sir, because the science and the country experiences have shown that mass vaccination is the only permanent and suitable solution to this pandemic, the only permanent way to bring back living the normal life. We thank the governments of Australia, New Zealand, India, and now USA, and all other partners who have provided us the vaccines through Gavi. We'll be forever grateful for their support. We also thank the hundreds of thousands of Fijians now that have come forward to be vaccinated. The worst will be over soon, Mr. Speaker, sir. With everyone's support, we have made tremendous progress, Mr. Speaker, sir, with 76.7% of 449,934 Fijians of the target population receiving their first dose, and 17.7% or 103,742 people receiving both doses. We are well on track to get 80% of the target population vaccinated by October 31st. But of course, we cannot be complacent. As the Honourable Prime Minister has said, let's target 100% of the target population. We cannot lose this opportunity, and we urge everyone who have got their first shot to ensure that you get a second jab when due. Those that have not had the first jab should get it in the next few days. Mr. Speaker, so again, a number of the opposition members were saying that we are overly dependent on vaccination. Honourable Rosova said, government's motto is vaccination, vaccination, vaccination. What is the alternative, Mr. Speaker, sir? What is the alternative? There is none, and of course they won't offer any. If they think we should have a complete lockdown, it is not a sustainable solution, as we've seen everywhere in the world. Vaccination is the only solution now, Mr. Speaker, sir. That is why our development partners, and now the bulk of it is from Australia and New Zealand, are giving us the vaccines, because that is the solution. That's how we will be able to get our borders open. That's how they will open up their borders to us. That's how we can get the tourists back, rebuild our economy, and get people back to jobs. Mr. Speaker, sir, that if we are able to get the target population vaccinated using the vaccines provided by the Australian and New Zealand governments, we will go back to them and they will be more confident in opening the border. Of course, with protocols and safe measures in place. They will feel safe to tell the citizens to come to Fiji for a holiday and not necessarily having to do a quarantine upon their return. That's how we get the tourism numbers up. That's how we get the hotel workers back to work. That's how we open up the hotels, All the ancillary businesses that surround the tourism sector will also open. If we just rely on lockdowns and no vaccinations, unfortunately, we will forever be closed to the outside world. That is why, Mr. Speaker, sir, the opposition wants a lockdown, because they don't want this crisis to end. So they could blame the socio-economic woes of this crisis on the government and make this an election issue. And that's what they seem to be focused on. Mr. Speaker, sir, even COVID-related debts have been politicized in this debate. Honorable Tambuya, Honorable Gerrigan Tambua, and others did not shy a cent away from politicizing COVID-related debts, unashamedly, completely being inconsiderate of the lost lives and the families. Mr. Speaker, sir, hundreds of thousands of people have unfortunately lost their lives due to the virus all over the world. But we do not have opposition members in those countries blaming those deaths on the Prime Minister or the government. Australia has had over 900 COVID-related deaths. Did the opposition blame the government there? In these countries, they're all working together, sir, to fight this crisis. It's only here that the opposition, while harping about bipartisanship, cannot even work with government on one single issue. They're too busy thinking about elections. They're too busy thinking about how they can score a small political point. They're too busy thinking about how many likes will I get in the next 1 hour. Please, the opposition should stop politicizing this crisis. But of course, I think as we've seen in the past, it will fall on deaf ears. Mr. Speaker, sir, why I've highlighted these issues is because we are reliably informed, not from one source, but many sources, that many opposition political parties and opposition members were celebrating prior to the budget, hoping that we will fail in the budget, Mr. Speaker, sir. They not only wanted us to fail, but they wanted Fiji to fail and succumb to the crisis, because that means political points for them. Of course, Mr. Speaker, sir, we've never fallen that low. We're here for the people, and we'll get this country out of this crisis in a sustainable way. This budget is just a start to that process. Mr. Speaker, sir, everyone needs to understand that the 2021 and 2022 budget was delivered under very challenging circumstances. We've already said that. The economy was hit hard by the pandemic, estimated to have contracted by 15.7% in 2020. Public finances have been under pressure as tax revenues took a major blow, declining by about 50%, and unemployment levels rose, making the socio-economic situation challenging. But somehow, Mr. Speaker, sir, the opposition, especially the leader of opposition, Honorable Alam Balabu, then Honorable Kurindranti, Honorable Prasad, and many others have been trying to portray that the current economic crisis is solely the doing of the Fijian government, in their favorite line that we have mismanaged the economy. This, of course, Mr. Speaker, is absurd. Almost every single nation in the world has been affected, and the economy is contracting. The majority of the tourism-dependent economies experienced double-digit economic contraction, Mr. Speaker, sir. These are facts. These are available publicly. Yet, of course, the opposition does not like the facts. They will still sing the same old fables, the same old storylines. So the current economic crisis and challenge, Mr. Speaker, sir, is not something that is unique to Fiji. Every other country has suffered from this devastating once in a 100-year economic shock. No country has been spared. But again, it's unfortunate that the opposition members have been trying to politicize the economy during one of the largest global economic crises that we are trying to come out from. And we will come out of soon. We'll come out of it soon, Mr. Speaker, sir. Honorable Prasad, we've said this so many times since 2014. Despite being an economist who should understand the economic consequences of border closures for almost 17 months in a tourism-dependent country, has also been trying to blame the entire effects of the crisis on the government. They've been continuously trying to undermine the economy and somehow seem to be under the illusion that if we lock down the economy, we'll be out of the economic crisis. When last year when we locked down, they were opposed to it. Mr. Speaker, sir, if we go that path, the economy will crumble down. We will need a sustainable solution, which is vaccination and gradual opening up of our international borders, and indeed even within the country itself. Honorable Prasad and some others seem to also imply that because the economy is slowing down pre-COVID, the current economic contraction is because of that. No, Mr. Speaker, sir. We've never denied that the Fijian economy started to slow down in 2019, but was still growing. Yes, it was slowing down pre-COVID due to the slowing global economy. But that does not mean that the current contraction is due to the continuation of the slowdown. There needs to be intellectual honesty. Absence of it. It's very clear that the current contraction could not be avoided if your borders are closed for 17 months. Any Form 6 student can tell you that. However, had we not had the current pandemic, our economy would have been in a very different state altogether. But as I've said, Mr. Speaker, sir, Honorable Prasad, as I always have said, lacks the intellectual honesty to give the real picture, as he is very much focused on the elections and his political experience and aspiration to form government and perhaps even become Prime Minister. For Honorable Prasad and NFP to think they can form the next government is just a dream. First, they should work on having a majority in the opposition before they can think about having a majority to form government. They've been rejected time and again at every poll, and with this level of dishonesty and greed for power, Mr. Speaker, sir, they will never succeed. Mr. Speaker, sir, at this juncture, I would also like to quickly touch on the issue of printing money. Ms. Honorable Tambuya spent a considerable amount of time talking about printing money in her response. I'm also told she's, of course, made a few TikToks on printing money. Mr. Speaker, sir, I would be worried if the opposition were to prepare a national budget if they think the solution for everything is to print money. Maybe this is one reason why they have never been able to come up with an alternative budget. And that is a point. NFP and SODELPA have never come up with an alternative budget. Even during elections, they have not come up with a budget. Mr. Speaker, sir, printing money may sound simple and attractive, but it's much more complex. It's a much more complex issue. Firstly, I'd like to remind Honorable Tambuya that the government doesn't have the legal right to print money. In every country, including in Fiji, this is left in the independent hands of the central bank, the RBA in our case. We do not interfere with the decisions of independent institutions, in particular, the monetary policies that is governed and run by the Reserve Bank of Fiji. Again, Mr. Speaker, so it's shocking that a former governor and the current leader of Unity Party also preaches about this interference with the RBF, and yet they talk about central bank independence on the other hand. Mr. Speaker, sir, there is a process called quantitative easing or monetization of government debt, or in simple terms, what Honorable Tambuya may refer to as printing of money. But if the RBF engages in this process, it can only lend to government. That means it will sit as a debt in the government books. It does not mean that RBF prints money and distributes it to the public and gives it free to government, Mr. Speaker, sir. When we present a budget, we put out a financing plan, as in page 321 of the budget estimates. You have the books there, listing where we will borrow money from. We do not decide nor tell the RBF to finance the debt, completely taking away the independence. Heaven forbid if these people are elected to government, that's what they'll do. But of course, if the central bank thinks that it is necessary, they can take that independent decision themselves to finance government debt. But as I've said, it's a complex matter and it's better to be left in the independent hands of the central bank. However, the central bank, when considering such decisions, have to look at many factors like what are the implications of such a decision on its mandate and policy objectives. And they have to ensure they're acting within the legal framework, which is the RBF Act. They need to be mindful of the impact it will have in the government securities bond market, as understandably, they would not want to come in and compete with market players like the banks, insurance companies, and FNPF. They have to be mindful of the implications on the reserves, the liquidity, inflation, and overall economy. And of course, they have to be careful, not creating dependency of government on central bank financing. These are the reasons, Mr. Speaker, sir, why we cannot and why we should not dictate to the RBF to lend to government as suggested by Honorable Tambuya. In fact, she's not even saying to lend. She's saying to simply print and give. Mr. Speaker, so on one hand, Honorable Tambuya also talks about debt, and on the other hand, talks about printing money, meaning borrowing more from the RBF, if she actually means borrowing. But even if she did mean borrowing, isn't that a contradiction? Or is it plain simple? She does not understand this economic, what she may call jargon, but pretends to know it. Any printing of money and funding of the deficit means lending to government. You cannot print and give free money to government. It'll mean that the paper will have no value at all. Mr. Speaker, sir, printing money meant no debt. Why aren't other countries doing it? Why didn't the Ratu Mara government do it? Why didn't the Rambuka, Chaudhry or Garase government print money in the manner as she understands and give it free to government? In fact, the RBF limits how much it can lend to government. There is no free money that can be created by printing money, Mr. Speaker, sir. So I hope that Honorable Tambuya talks to the Better Finance advisor to understand this. But I know that she is only used to Ponzi schemes that exist in other jurisdictions. Mr. Speaker, sir, Honorable Tuisawau and Honorable Lalambalavu claimed that revenue projection and the budget is optimistic, when I had clearly explained in the budget address, with a lot of details provided in the budget supplement, that we are taking a very conservative revenue estimation strategy due to the uncertainties. We use a similar strategy for the 2020-2021 budget, and it worked well during these times of uncertainty, Mr. Speaker, sir. If I could explain. When we delivered the 2020-2021 budget, it was delivered under a period of great uncertainty, and thus the budget framework was based on a very conservative revenue projection, resulting in a large projected deficit of $2 billion, equivalent to 20.2% of the GDP. With the financial year 2020-2021 almost coming to a close in a few days' time, the fiscal deficit is likely to be around 11.5% of GDP, almost half of 20.2% budgeted net deficit, because our revenues are estimated to have overperformed and we maintained a tight control on expenditure. With a lower projected net deficit of around 11.5% in 2020-2021, government debt is estimated to be around $7.6 billion or 79.2% of GDP as of July 2021. This is almost $700 million lower than the earlier projected debt of $8.3 billion or 83.4% of GDP. If the nominal GDP is unchanged at the levels projected in the budget, the debt to GDP ratio would have been much lower at 76.8% of GDP. Mr. Speaker, says similarly to the last budget, a conservative revenue estimation strategy has also been adopted for the 2021-2022 budget. The downside of the strategy is that projected deficit and debt levels look higher. And in this case, 2021-2022 deficit projected at 16.2% of GDP, and debt expected to rise to $9 billion or 91.6% of GDP. However, Mr. Speaker, so it is a prudent strategy to adopt during times of uncertainty, with any over collections in revenues serving as a buffer and consequently lower borrowings and debt levels than planned. As we saw in this financial year, it is likely that actual debt could be lower than projected if border reopening and pickup in tourism and other sectors are much stronger than anticipated. Again, Mr. Speaker, sir, the Honourable Leader of Opposition seemed to have the misconception that if our revenues underperform, it gives us the leeway to borrow more and increase the debt further. That is fundamentally not true, Mr. Speaker, sir. The borrowing limit and the total appropriation is capped and approved by Parliament. If revenue collections are below forecast, we will have to come back to Parliament to increase borrowings if we're going to carry on with the same levels of expenditure. It is not something that can be done automatically as the Leader of Opposition thinks. Further, Mr. Speaker, sir, I had said this clearly in the address also, the Ministry of Economy will closely monitor the fiscal performance in the months ahead with a likely revision of the budget in the second half of the financial year of 2021-2022 if the situation deteriorates. This would mean a tight restraint and possible major reductions in government spending. Alternatively, if the situation improves, we get the vaccination levels up, we have some form of border opening, some tourism coming in through tourists coming in December, January, and the situation improves, a revision of the budget may or may not be necessary to recalibrate the budget framework with expenditure reprioritizations. Also, Mr. Speaker, sir, Honorable Geringal Tambuas and a few others claimed that this is the election budget. Every time we deliver a good budget, they say it's an election budget. Do they mean to say that we should not deliver good budgets? Are they saying that we should not be assisting the market vendors, the give electricity subsidy, don't assist the minibus drivers, the taxi drivers, the carrier drivers, don't give, the sanitary pad provisions, don't support the unemployed in the formal and the informal sector, don't help the security guards? Are she saying all of that? That because we are assisting them, therefore it's become an election budget? We don't even think about the elections. We are concerned about how to assist our people now, how to get them out of this rut. That's precisely what we are concerned about. And these people are talking about elections. The only single time that I mentioned elections in the budget, Mr. Speaker, was about the election budgetary allocation.
Tell them all what they know is about election.
Mr. Speaker, sir, just like every year, the opposition was again obsessed with Head 50 and allocations under R. Mr. Speaker, sir, just look at Head 50. Head 50 is a miscellaneous appropriation head with the Permanent Secretary for Economy being the responsible accounting officer for Head 50, not the Minister for Economy. Of the $713 million, Mr. Speaker, sir, allocated under Head 50, $200 million is for unemployment support. I don't have a say in that. People apply, they qualify, the money is disbursed. And over $50 million in other assistance like electricity subsidy, food distribution, and other relief measures we announced. Over $165 million of the $713 million is for TELs and toppers. Again, got nothing to do with me. It goes to the TSLB services. $40 million is allocated for the Fiji Recovery Rebate Package, Fiji Airways and the tourism sector. $20 million allocated for the health public-private partnership. $16.4 million for the elections. On top of $23 million for the Fijian Elections Office. That's what the money is there for. Mr. Speaker, sir, given that these allocations doesn't directly relate to the operations of any single ministry, it is placed under Head 50. But the opposition seems to imply that we have placed it under Head 50 so I could control the budget. They make it out as I'm sitting there with all this money. It's the responsibility of the PS of economy to manage this head, Mr. Speaker, sir, not the Minister for Economy. Again, Mr. Speaker, sir, allocations are put under R as it needs extra scrutiny and stringent monitoring. Are they saying we should not put it under R, $200 million, don't have any scrutiny? It is to ensure we prudently manage government finances and ensure release of large expenditure allocations are aligned to cash management strategies. When you have large weights of money have to go out, the cash flow has to be managed. That's why it has to be put in Head 50 also. Mr. Speaker, sir, and again, all RIEs, $1 million and below, does not even hit my desk. The PS for Economy actually approves RIEs up to $1 million. And in fact, we're looking at increasing it too. Used to be about $250,000 before. It's now $1 million. Mr. Speaker, sir, I think it would be amiss of me not to touch on Bill 17, although we'll be debating it on Friday. We've seen a lot of drama about it, Mr. Speaker, sir. But as the Honourable Prime Minister said, we want the people of Fiji to understand the government's intentions, and it's unfortunate that the opposition grabbed the bill and gave it an ethnic twist. It is an administrative matter, Mr. Speaker, sir, and should have never been given an ethnic twist. Honourable Gawaka claims to be a private sector champion, devoted his entire life to the private sector. But his entire time slot was about Bill 17. Nothing about the budget. And coming from the private sector, you would think that he would be the first person, calls himself a former banker, that he would understand precisely that this is an administrative matter. If he bothered not to follow Honorable Tambuye's lead and read the law, read the amendments, then he would again understand it is an administrative matter. In an economic shock as significant as COVID-19, Mr. Speaker, sir, the government has to be innovative and be creative to ensure we attract investment, internally and externally, by ensuring we improve the ease of doing business. For thousands of Fijian unemployed and underemployed, we need to ensure that conditions to attract investment are created, which in turn will result in job creation and lay the platform for private sector-led economic recovery. Mr. Speaker, sir, suffice to say, Bill 17 does not take away the right of any landowner or landowning unit to authorize the giving of lease. It does not reduce the amount of lease money that landowners expect to collect. The TLTB CEO has clarified this. The TLTB CEO, I heard on the weekend somebody from the opposition. Somebody saying from the opposition that, we have not heard from the management of TLTB, and now when the CEO of TLTB has made comments, they've completely ignored it because it does not fit in with their little storyline. It really is an insult to the landowners of Fiji and the general population of Fiji in terms of how they're going about. The fees even collected from consent applications doesn't even go to landowners. Mr. Speaker, sir, this will ensure there will be ease of developing land through financing. A lot more developments will take place. The land around the leased land will increase in value, and therefore the landowners will be able to demand a higher land lease, for premiums and also for lease purposes, annual lease purposes. And every 5 years the rent gets reviewed. And now under the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, sir, you actually have market rates that needs to be paid. Landowners never got market rates before. Now it is constitutionally mandated they get market rates. Have the opposition spoken about that? Have they acknowledged that? No. Mr. Speaker, sir, I must thank Honorable Bulitavu, who recognized this and had the courage to not follow the deception of his colleagues and stand up for something that actually benefits landowners. The intention of consequential Bill 16 and 17 is simply to streamline processes and ensure that people who want to use financing to invest and further develop lease Itaukea land can do so without seeking the process or going through this consent process, which will not affect anybody's rights or in any way derogate their rights. Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have done a similar thing for state land that is being leased to ensure that all financing concerning leased land can be expedited by removing unnecessary processes. This is a very essential point that opposition conveniently have left out when feeding lies to the public. Another lie, of course, the government did not consult TLTB. The SG's office had consultation with the TLTB management. Mr. Speaker, sir, all this was undertaken by the opposition to ensure that the good initiatives in the 2021-2022 budget were overshadowed. All this, Mr. Speaker, sir, to further their political careers at the expense of a country that is already facing the monumental challenge that is COVID. Mr. Speaker, sir, talking about Honorable Bulitavu, when he made some extremely sensible and common sense statements and very good rationale, Honorable Gavoka flippantly says that Fiji First should give him a ticket, completely debunking the credibility of the content of what Honorable Bulitavu said, giving it a political twist. Because it goes to show for them, everything is about politics. Everything is about getting the upper hand. Everything is about how we can put down the government. Problem though is that Honorable Gavoka had the courage, of course, newfound courage, of trying to make mockery of Honorable Bulitavu's contribution, but was definitely quiet and meek and almost impotent when it came to Honorable Bulano, the chip in the vaccine comment. Honorable Tambuye's over Honorable Tambuye's defiance of him and his leadership of SODELPA. Not that we are interested in the monotonous and sordid internal dynamics of SODELPA and the backbiting and the treachery, or what we colloquially say the LM politics, but it demonstrates a hollow party. It demonstrates a hollow party with a hollow leader and a hollow leader of opposition, desperate to be thrown a lifeline, which came for them in the form of Bill 17. Unfortunately for them, it will be another debacle. Some may argue another TikTok debacle. Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm sure most of us have seen the recent ANZ report on the budget by renowned international economist Tom Kearney and Dr. Kisti Sen. And let me quote what they've said in the ANZ report which came out just a week or so ago. And I quote, and it says, the Bainimarama government has shown its economic credentials and delivered a strong 2021-2022 budget that meets the national interest by protecting the health of all Fijians and setting a clear pathway towards economic recovery. Unquote. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is the ANZ group from Sydney. Of course, the opposition is not going to listen to this. It does not suit their narrative. Mr. Speaker, sir, whilst unfortunately the opposition had conveniently digressed from the many new initiatives announced in the budget, the fact remains that this is a people-centered budget and a bold step towards our economic recovery. It is an extraordinary budget for extraordinary times. We have to ensure that the unemployed and the vulnerable are protected and provided economic support. We have ensured that apart from income support, we provide real financial relief to ease the burden on Fijians at these challenging times, whether it be provision of sanitary pads, payment of market stall fees, provision of electricity subsidy, or guaranteed cane price support of $85 per tonne. We have ensured that we support our businesses with working capital to keep them afloat as we prepare for opening of borders and business and economic recovery. We have maintained the low taxes and provided them the certainty. We have streamlined business processes to help businesses grow and prosper. Mr. Speaker, sir, just like every other crisis, this crisis will eventually come to an end. We as a country need to work together to get out of this crisis. This is not the time to play politics, and cheap politics is that. This is the time to ensure we join hands and stand side by side to defeat this crisis and bring Fiji back to normalcy, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, with those few words, I'd like to end my right of reply. Thank you very much.